Hello, everyone. You are listening to the Maitri podcast between friends, conversations with Maitri. This is your host, Nandini Ray, welcoming you all to our show. While men have always played an important role in shaping public policies and community awareness in many areas, domestic violence prevention often remains ignored within this group. But how do we engage South Asian men in the movement? Today, my colleague and Maitri's longtime advocate Zakia Afrin will have a conversation with S Suresh about South Asian men's engagement in the movement to end domestic violence. It is my honor to introduce Suresh. As a community leader and activist, Suresh is vocal on social justice issues, including domestic violence, gun control, LGBTQ rights, religious and caste-based discriminations, environmental rights, and racism in all shapes and forms. Prior to joining the partnership board, Suresh served as a member of the Board of Trustees at Maitri for 3 years, and he participated actively in issues critical to addressing domestic violence in general and within the South Asian community in specific. He also played an instrumental role in helping Maitri to bring men into difficult conversations around domestic violence. A product executive with more than 25 years of experience in enterprise software, Suresh is a writer, avid hiker, dog lover, amateur actor, and environmentally conscious. Please meet Zakia Afrin. Zakia has been an advocate for immigrant women at Maitri for over 16 years and currently serves as the Director of Survivor Advocacy Programs at Maitri. She is a senior fellow and adjunct professor of international law at Golden Gate University in San Francisco. Zakia represents clients with their immigration needs and drives Maitri's policy advocacy efforts, uplifting the voices of immigrant survivors. She founded Aditya in 2020, a social and cultural platform for the Bangladeshi diaspora in the US.
Thank you, Suresh, for finding the time to be with us today. In June, many of us are celebrating healthy fatherhood and male role models who respect women and people of all genders. Not only that, they also actively engage in gender-based violence prevention movement. So I'm truly delighted to have you with us today. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Zakia. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in whatever way I can to advance the cause that Maitri and you all have been working for multiple decades now.
Thank you, Suresh. So I will get started with a recent listening session that Maitri has done on marital rape and consent in intimate relationships. So as you know, we were trying to find out how our South Asian community feel about the current legislation in California on marital rape and how has been their experience about consent in intimate relationships, learning about it from their experiences, and where they stand when it comes to teaching it to the new generation. And Suresh, you have played a very important role for us right from the beginning, providing us with inputs in questions and also agreeing to facilitate our male community member sessions, which unfortunately, as we saw, had only one participant. Even though we reached out to over 10,000 community members through various medias, we did not have people sign up to come and talk to us about this. So I wanted to know what your thoughts about this topic. Why do you think that men are not interested to join this conversation? Or in general, why do we see so few men in the domestic violence prevention movement?
It's a very insightful question, Zakia. As I was thinking about it as you were outlaying the question, I think two or three key thoughts popped up in my mind. I will kind of focus it a little more on the South Asian male rather than men in general, but I think some of what I'm saying will be very applicable to men in general. domestic violence is viewed today in 2023 somewhat differently from what it was a decade before that and a further decade before that. 20, 30 years ago, we would simply not even acknowledge the ills of domestic violence. Instead, the family would conveniently shove the issues under the rug and then behave as though everything was normal. Today, that is not exactly the case. There are more number of people who are coming out seeking for help. There are more women who are moving from victims to survivors. And this reflects in the amount of calls that Maitri gets, number of people Maitri gets directly is involved in helping. All of these things indicate the fact that like DV is somewhat different today. However, one of the most important things that is kind of understated here is that while DV is a little more openly talked about, who are actually the people who are doing it? It is not men. It is women who are victims, who want to become survivors. They are the ones who are coming out. They are saying enough is enough. We want to get help. We want to lead our life with dignity. As far as men, especially men in my generation, which is baby boomers, they tend to live in a very different world. They have focused largely on materialism. They have focused on capitalism. They have focused on patriarchy. They have hardcore views on all of those things. And they have had little or no incentive to change those points of view. I myself had to go through a series of unlearning and relearning over the last 10, 15 years of my biases to reach the point where I am. And yes, today I can call myself a feminist, but like I couldn't have called myself a feminist 15 years ago if I had continued to pursue the materialistic interests that I have had. Most people who come to this country do that. And for many men of South Asian origin, they never choose to change their points of view at all. And something has to trigger for them to make that shift in the point of view change. Maybe they have daughters. Maybe they have a wonderful wife that who would challenge them. Maybe they have a direct reason to connect with the problem. Maybe they're not getting those opportunities. And if they are not getting those opportunities, they tend to be indifferent at best and ignorant at worst. You know, there's another angle through which another lens through which I can view this problem. You know, we can talk about all of this thing from the axis of empathy. Empathy is possible direct to people with whom we are directly connected, far more than people with whom we are not directly connected. I'm going to read out a quote here from one of the articles I read. The article's title is Does Empathy Have Limits? And this is a very significant quote. We are not psychologically constituted to feel towards a stranger as we feel towards someone we love. We are not capable of feeling a million times worse about suffering of a million than about the suffering of one. Empathy essentially is a zero-sum game. It is very exhausting. And unless there is a real reason for people to feel empathy towards others, such as there's an issue that directly affected them, maybe someone in their near family experienced it, and therefore they have a shift of opinion, and then they start showing empathy towards people in that community, in that cause. Men tend to continue to live in ignorance or being indifferent to the problem that they know that exists, which is domestic violence. This is somewhat different for the current generation. So as we move from my generation to the millennials and the current generation, there is a significant shift in the way their minds have been wired, both young men, women, and of all gender. For them, they can accept gender without judgment. For them, social equity is the norm. And for them, empathy towards others comes more easily than it is for people of the older generation. And it is in them we should have hope that, like, there is going to be a shift possible. In them, I meaning, I specifically would like to think that the young men, second generation South Asian men in this country, I have more hope in them that they would accept the fact that, like, domestic violence is a real problem. They would have more empathy because they are willing to talk about it. And like I said, like, they accept gender without judgment. They accept people without judgment. And they somehow understand equity is more meaningful rather than the materialistic driven pursuits of the previous generation.
Could not agree with you more. Being a parent of two young children, I can see how they are thinking differently than us, responding differently to some of the stressors that we have had during our young years and we continue to have. And there is a lot of hope there. You said a lot of great things, Suresh, and a lot is there to unpack. There is more acknowledgement now of domestic violence than before, but we also see who are the people who are bringing it to the fora, right? Who are bringing this problem in front of everybody. It's the women, mostly, majority of the victims, survivors, advocates, activists are women in this issue. And then men need the willingness to unlearn all of this toxic masculinity and all of the biases that have been taking roots within our communities for so long. Now that they have to also make that conscious choice to unlearn, to change their behavior. So I also want to ask then, of course, we have hope for the youth, but what do we do with our generation? How do we encourage them to get involved?
Our best bet would be to use the youth to do the job for us. I think if young men, a boy or a girl in the family, or anybody of any gender, if they challenge their parents, I think we have a better shot at effecting some shift in their viewpoint. I think whenever somebody gets involved with a cause, today it happens because personal relationship. So when I was in the board of Maitri, I would invite people to the gala and they would show up. But they show up because I invited them. They show up because of some kind of an obligation to me. They show up not because of the cause that they have, which is like Maitri and domestic violence as a problem that needs to be solved. I think so that's an example where, like, I think if we are able to have affected their involvement in the cause rather than the person who is inviting them to the cause, then I think we would be better suited at having a more successful shift in the mind of them. And I think the youth will be our real best bet to make it happen. We can sit and talk as much as we want and try to create literature, educational brochures, broadcasts, etc. But I think if this podcast is listened to by the parent as well as the child, I think it's going to be far more powerful than they just dealing with it by themselves. That's one thought that I have, definitely.
That's a brilliant idea. And I hope that we can take this from you, take this advice, and try to see how we engage our children in all these very important conversations for the community in general, not just for one generation or the other. These are issues we all need to address going forward, and also looking backwards, acknowledging the problem, taking responsibility for it, and then making sure that there is accountability for the future that nobody engages in this kind of relationship, abuses, and create a healthy community for everybody. Now, you mentioned serving on the Maitri board, and I also want to just say a few words for our listeners that you have been member of the Maitri Board of Trustees for a few years, and you have played a very important role in not only bringing new people, but with your ideas, with your leadership. Um, you try to create a new energy around the organization. Now, from there, you have also now reached the mainstream domestic violence prevention movement. You have been on the board of the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence, which is an umbrella organization for the state of California, with all of domestic violence organizations being members of it for a few years. I want to hear a little bit from you about your experience in as a board member in a mainstream organization, and what did you see that was different from, let's say, a culturally responsive organization in terms of priorities, or any other thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
Thank you, Zakia, to make that shift towards the partnership or the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. That, as you introduce, it's a statewide organization with various member organizations, of which Maitri is one of them. Together, they try to address issues that are the problem of domestic violence. And the thing that attracted me towards them is like, they said like their goal is to really end domestic violence, a tall order, given how patriarchal the society is, but highly desirable aspirational goal. And it is very different from how that partnership and its operations are compared to what Maitri does. Maitri, of course, when I was there, I had a very tangible feeling about like the direct impact it made on the clients it served. Sitting in this board, this is primarily a role of governance. So we are looking at the operations of how the larger organization exists, and little less connected to the movement itself per se directly. But even that aside, like there are certain things that is very visible. I think one of the key things that the partnership does is creating policies that can benefit everybody. Now, I think that is actually a very significant role the partnership plays, which is carving out policies, which is how I think we can effect changes in some larger sense. We talked about how are they culturally responsive. More than cultural responsiveness, what I have seen from them is a desire for equity across the board. The last couple of years, let's take a quick look at like what they did as far as policy advocacy is concerned. In 2022, they sponsored and won 4 goals, which the SB 914, Senate Bill 914, addressed homelessness. And you and I know that, like, how homelessness creates unhoused or unhoused women. 57% of the women who are unhoused are there because of domestic violence. And so when they brought up the SB 914 to address homelessness, they are in effect addressing DV in some extent. They were working with SB 1017, which is to provide protection from eviction for DV survivors. SB 975 provides protection from coerced debt for survivors. And financial abuse is one of the ways in which DV perpetrators continue to actually do domestic violence. And so 975 gives them a protection from any kind of coerced debt that victims may be forced into. And AB 1726, which was providing an address confidentiality program, again crucial for the need to stay safe at home for DV survivors. All of them are excellent initiatives, but they are not tuned to any specific culture or any specific ethnic group. They are they cut across all ethnic groups, cut across all kinds of people, and so it's an effort. They're all laudable efforts, but they focus on equity more than equity and protection for everybody, rather than something that is culturally responsive. Uh, and let's just also look at briefly what we did this year, right? Like we focused on a couple of acts, AB 1497, which is Justice for Survivors, and SB 36, California Safe Haven. They're very similar to the ones that I talked about in a little more detail about 2022. But if we want to do something more culturally responsive, if we want to do something more at a policy level for people from outside, we probably need to talk about problems that are very unique to to a certain number of organizations. I know you are very uh, vocal about transnational abandonment. I haven't had anybody the in the partnership talk about transnational abandonment at a policy level in yet, but I can hope that like they will do it at some point in time in the future, because this will directly impact people who come into this country, typically from the South Asian countries, and then abandon here. And these kind of issues focusing on immigration, etc., needs to happen from the partnership, and this is going to happen only by representation. I By representation, I mean from within the partnership, you should have a champion, or as a part of many of the councils that the partnership has, there should be a champion who can drive these things to bring visibility into it and subsequently create actionable plan for them. And until that happens, I think some of these issues will probably lag behind the issues that are more relevant to people, mainstream domestic violence survivors.
Thank you, Suresh, for talking about the policy advocacy that happens at the mainstream level. And as you probably know, I'm a member of the Policy Advisory Council for CPEDV. And one of the things that I try to always bring up is how a bill could always, if there is any component to it, it can ensure language access for all groups of people. If there is any angle that can either harm or benefit immigrant survivors, I like to mention that and bring it to the discussion table. And sometimes there are disagreements just because of these cultural responsiveness services that we focus on. That discussion also happens and we kind of hear each other out. We have disagreements, but then we also appreciate each other's point of view. So this is very important for us to be at those discussion tables, like you correctly mentioned, and not all the time to get what we want to get out of it, but also to learn about priorities for everybody. Like when equity is being championed, it actually serves everybody, every survivor out there, irrespective of their culture and immigration status and others. So definitely we appreciate all of that. And like you mentioned, that we have been advocating for transnational abundant clients and some benefits from that. We talk about immigration issues, and these things keep coming up, but not so much at the state level, and we don't see much support from all of the agencies because of the small number of people a bill may affect. But we are there, and we will continue to uplift the voices of survivors that we are serving. And thank you for your service at the board level as well. You are probably the first South Asian male members that they have had. So that's a first, and I hope that more people, male and female, and other genders, they get encouraged to join these kind of um, discussions, represent their voices in policy making spaces to make the whole survivor environment better than it is now. I'm going towards a completely different direction now. And this is more about your personal achievement. You have taken a very early retirement, if I may say so. And since then, you have been writing. You were writing for the Fair Observer, many articles and blogs. And then you kind of switched to writing novels. So tell us a little bit about that. And I must mention that at least two of your books, which were written in Tamil, your native language, have very strong female leads. So can you talk about this switch in your interest and about your novels?
That's one of my favorite topics, Zakia. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to indulge. Um, I did move away from the uh, active Silicon Valley tech way of living. I hate to use the word phrase rat race, but that's what I stepped away from. And I had always wanted to write, even from when I was very young. I had always wanted to write, and I discovered that I have some degree of skills to do it. So I started writing about various socioeconomic issues in English, and I think I published close to about like a 50 about 50 articles in Fair Observer. And writing that many articles sometimes numb you. I think after all of that, I continue to see exactly the same kind of stuff repeating over and over again. I had written so much about gun violence, and did it matter? Because like it's just sometimes it would feel like you're just shouting in an echo chamber, because the kind of gun violence that continues to happen even today, the number of killings that happen, unnecessary killings that happen, is just it's just really so sad. And so it is the same with any kind of issue that I had worked with in Fair Observer, and it it cost me uh, it gave me a reason to take pause and then like see what else could I do, and I wanted to see if I could rekindle my interest in writing in Tamil. Having lived in this country for almost of three plus into the fourth decade, and where my thinking itself is happening in English, I was wondering if I could actually successfully write in Tamil. And one thing led to the other. And today I have published three books, two fiction and one nonfiction. And like you point out, the first book published was a novel that is set in the city of Hyderabad, India, and it talks about a romantic interest between a Hindu girl and a Muslim boy. So even though I shifted away from talking about socioeconomic issues, even my novels or fictional writing continue to dwell on the same serious topics. So the one that I dealt with is the irrational hatred Hindus and Muslims have towards each other, and uh, and that exists even today. And it is little more pronounced because of the way in which uh, things happen in India, the kind of administration that is there in India today. And this book actually tries to delve into some of the emotional aspects of the irrational hatred, juxtaposing it in the context of a Hindu girl and a Muslim boy. And the second book that I published, it's an anthology of short story collections, and I ended up dealing with issues that are very unique to women, domestic violence, sexual abuse, and stuff like that. So it's actually not a very easy book to read, It deals with really difficult topics, and one of the reasons that I was motivated to write that thing was obviously that if you at least write it in the form of a fiction, perhaps it will connect and strike a chord with a different set of people. And the dozen stories are there. There are a couple of things I ended up doing it. Like as a writer, I would experiment. I tried to experiment writing a story with just 50 words. In 50 words, can you communicate something powerful? And then like at the other end of the uh, spectrum is a 5,000 word quote unquote short story, or it could border on novella. So I experimented various things in between them. In these things, I dealt with childhood sexual abuse. I dealt with other kinds of issues that women uniquely face: betrayal, violence, domestic violence, and but I also know that like not all men are like that, and therefore there are a couple of stories which portray men in a positive light, or in the neutral to positive light there. So it has been a very fulfilling um, portion of my life to have been able to to a write these things, and b go through the usual obstacles and brand new writer faces when you try to get yourself published. And I was fortunate in the larger scheme of things. I was fortunate because I was able to find a publisher with whom I could connect without an inordinately long amount of search. And that too, sitting in America, finding a publisher in Chennai, India, is not the easiest. So so yeah, I think that journey has gone off very interestingly, and they are dominantly female lead based stories. They also touch upon social equity and stuff like that, and it'll be somewhat bit of sarcastic look at these social equity issues that exist. One story I remember is talks about how overpaid some of the tech workers are, and how much they get to enjoy versus, versus others who do very good job, yet they barely scrape things and then make ends meet, right? So I did deal with a couple of those kind of issues, but yeah, they are all predominantly female lead based stories dealing with women's issues.
Okay. If I read some harsh reviews of your work, I would know who are writing it. Now, Suresh, I wish that I could read Tamil and I read these stories and your novels. I believe people can find them in the United States in various libraries and other places. Could you tell us where somebody can look for your work?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, you said I will definitely answer that, but like before that, you said like harsh criticism. Uh, the Santa Clara County Library has both my books, and my third book, which I published really earlier this year, is also there. It's a nonfiction. We will come to that book, but um, the first two, the first one is called Velicham, which is a novel, and the second one is called Tandavalam, which is the short story collection, and both of them are available in Santa Clara libraries, right? So there's a suite of them.
So, wish you all the best with your future endeavors. And thank you once again for spending some time with me. We'll put the links of the CPEDV work you did, your books, and also your blog writings with this interview so that people can read some of the stuff that you have worked on. I absolutely love the English writings and look forward to more from you, both in English and, of course, in Tamil. That would add to the diverse language collections that the U.S. libraries have, and people have more access to their own languages. So, Suresh, before leaving, any last thoughts?
I just want to simply thank you, Zakia, for this opportunity to to share my thoughts and viewpoints with you and the folks that Maitri is able to reach out to. I think these are really, really important topics as to why South Asian men are not as plugged in on their on an issue as important as domestic violence. They also need to understand that there are organizations like the partnership exists that help at a state level everybody. Maybe there could be somebody else who would throw their hat in and then join the partnerships board in a future point in time to effect some more shift. And yes, if anybody, if through all of this means, if anybody is going to be reading my books, nothing could make me more happier.
Absolutely. I hope people get introduced to you and read some of these wonderful, wonderful things that you have created. So I'll let you go for today. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us. And we look forward to you joining us in the domestic violence prevention movement.
Thank you very much, Zakia.
Thank you, Suresh and Zakia, for this great, insightful discussion. I'm sure this discussion will motivate many men in our community to think about this issue and to do their part. Listeners, please share this episode with your networks. Bye for now. Please keep listening to the Maitri podcast, Between Friends Conversations with Maitri. Find all our episodes on YouTube, SoundCloud, and on other podcast apps. Please like, share, and comment. Share this episode with your network. Thank you.
This show is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as legal advice. Always consult an attorney for legal advice. Views expressed by guests of the radio show are individual opinions and not endorsed by Maitri.
This project was made possible by funding provided by Santa Clara County Office of Gender-Based Violence Prevention.